Hi, I'm Lise Wheel with Law&Crime. We're back with the Tex McIver case, and I have two guests with me now. I have Vincent Hill, who's bravely standing outside the courthouse there in that Tex McIver case. There we see him. Okay. It's cold there, I hear. Hi, Vincent. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. It's actually quite warm today. We're supposed to get up to about 70 degrees. This morning it was a little chilly, but right now we're okay.
Okay, well, you're not wearing a big, heavy overcoat or anything like that. And I've got Joseph Morgan, who is our forensics expert. Joseph was with us on the top of the hour. Great to have you both back here with me. Vincent, so you've been in the courtroom all day today. Tell me generally what the feel is. You can actually look at the jury. We can't see that here at Law&Crime. Tell us your impression of the jury right now today and kind of what your feeling was of them this morning.
Well, I can definitely tell you this. They appear to be very tired. I did see a lot of yawns. Of course, I've been in the courtroom since 9 this morning. These jurors are having long nights and early mornings. They've been doing this since Tuesday. So I think it's starting to wear on them. But at the same time, they're very engaged with what's going on inside the courtroom. I saw several jurors taking notes. They were passing questions over to the deputy that passed those to the judge so those questions could be asked. And they're really interested in this case. Of course, there was some back and forth between the prosecution and the defense. It got heated at times, and you could tell the jury was definitely picking up on that.
Now, this is a state where jurors can ask questions. What kind of questions are they asking? Is there a general theme to the questions, or are they just kind of all over the place?
Some were all over the place, but more were directed to questions that kind of got dismissed during the actual court that came back up. Like, I noticed this judge doesn't use the word sustained or overruled. He may just say, I will allow that question or next question. So a lot of those questions that we had that next question scenario, those questions came back up.
Okay. All right. And Joseph, back to you and the forensics. We were talking about the gun. My question to you is, do you think, in all of your experience, that this is the kind of a gun that one would use to premeditate? Because remember, this is a premeditated count. The first count is actually premeditated, malice count, to use in this kind of scenario in the back seat of a car facing the victim, and with 12 pounds force, I think you said it took to actually, to make that trigger go. Is this the kind of gun that one would, normally is not the right word, but would typically use to commit such a crime?
I think that it's real important, Lise, that we revisit his history a little bit. He's got quite the collection of weapons. First off, any loaded weapon is a potentially lethal weapon. But if you were going down the list of weapons that are out there, and he has many, this would not be at the top of the list as far as potential. The potential for lethality is the way I like to phrase it. The 38 caliber pistol, which many people are familiar with, police used to use them years and years ago as their primary sidearm, and they've fallen out of favor relative to semi-autos that are out there. And as a matter of fact, it kind of, it was kind of strange for me hearing someone using a revolver nowadays in this world of semi-autos. So it kind of piqued my interest a little bit, maybe for nostalgia, I don't know, whatever reason. But this particular weapon is kind of interesting as well. I was talking about how the hammer, the external hammer, is shrouded. It's not like a regular hammer, and that's going to come into play when the ballistics expert gets up and they begin to talk about the nature of this weapon. And one of the other things they're going to talk about, Lise, is what is the potential of this weapon? What's it commonly used for? And we'll probably hear them talk about personal defense. This is what would be classified as a classic pocket pistol. That is, it's easily concealable. It doesn't have a spur on the hammer to get caught on clothing, and it's easy to draw. I'm still scratching my head. I'd love to hear Vincent, his thoughts relative to when they were engaged in conversation about the passing of this weapon inside of the cabin of this vehicle. I find this all very, very interesting and a bit confusing at this point, at least.
Well, let's go to Vincent and ask Vincent that question. What do you think, to answer Joseph, what was the jury's reaction when there was that discussion about what was going on with the gun at that point? What was it? How was the jury reacting to all of this?
Yeah, I think there was a look of confusion and utter not understanding. As a gun owner myself, that's not something that I would be doing. Passing a gun from the back seat to the front seat, or passing a gun in a car in general, is not a smart practice. So it definitely showed on the jury's face that they weren't understanding why someone would quite do that.
Is there any other reaction from the jury to, for example, a couple of days ago, there was a long-winded, the law firm chairman or the president of the law firm went on for a couple of hours talking about potentially a motive where Tex had not made as much money as he had in the last couple of years. Was there any reaction from the jury from that? Or was it just sort of like, kind of boredom at that point? I mean, is the jury reacting to any of the motive evidence here?
From what I saw today, there was no reaction as far as the motive. There was reaction, however, when the defense was up and he was talking about this nurse Sullivan who had gone to the hospital, and people were already saying, oh, this is like OJ, he's going to get off because he's a very powerful man. And she made the statement to investigators or to the prosecution on that night that, she hopes that they actually get this guy because he needs to pay for what he had done before anyone knew what had really happened. So there was definitely a lot of facial reaction to that, of how people were already talking about this case before they knew the circumstances.
But you're not saying that they're actually talking amongst themselves, though, right? Just what they'd heard out in the community.
Well, this was regarding the hospital staff there at Emory on that night. There were nurses, there were techs that were saying that, oh, well, this is suspicious. Even Nurse Sullivan, who was on the stand for several hours this morning, was saying this is suspicious because they drove her to Emory versus going to Grady or calling an ambulance and calling 911. So the defense played that as in they were already trying and convicting Tex McIver based on something they didn't know.
Right. I want to go to Joseph for a minute about that. The choice in the hospital that they went to, that was very interesting, and the prosecution is really playing that up. You're both very familiar, both Joseph and Vincent, you're both familiar with the area and the hospitals. Why, Joseph, is that so important as to the hospital that they chose or that they didn't choose going to?
Yeah, Lisa, it is kind of significant, and this is why. Two hospitals were mentioned in the course of the testimony this morning. You had AMC, which is Atlanta Medical Center, as well as Grady. Both of these hospitals are level 1 trauma centers. And for folks at home that kind of don't know this vernacular, this means that they can be everything to everybody when it comes to a traumatically related case. They specialize in motor vehicle accidents, brain injuries, firearms-related things, nasty cuts, industrial accidents, all that stuff. What it means is that they have trauma surgeons that are physically in place in the hospital at all times, and not just trauma surgeons, but surgeons that can do things like with bone and maxillofacial specialists and all these sorts of things. They went from in close proximity to both of these hospitals. As a matter of fact, I worked at the medical examiner's office in Atlanta. You can stand on the top floor of Atlanta Medical Center and literally look across the way, and across the 75-85 connector, you can actually see Grady. That's how close these places are. Emory, however, is about 4 miles away, and it is not in the same category with Grady or AMC. It's a fine hospital. It's associated with the university and the university's medical school. They've trained a lot of the doctors that work at AMC, and particularly at Grady. It's kind of a curious choice that they would go that far. I was listening to the young physician, I can't recall her name now, but she was making reference in the emergency room. They asked her specifically, how many gunfire-related cases had you worked? she had to kind of pause for a second, and she said, a handful. A handful means different things to different people. But if you were to ask that same question to somebody that worked at Grady, they would say, too many to count. And because it's an inner city hospital, it's not in an affluent area. It's right in downtown, and they handle everything in the city, with the exception of those cases that are pushed toward A and C.
So it really would have been a better idea, but to go to a different hospital. But the other thing that has to be considered, I suppose, and the defense will really push this, I would think, is that, at that point there's been a traumatic event that's happened, i.e. Diana's been shot, and probably people aren't thinking at their, most alert status, right? So can he really be blamed for going to one hospital over the other? I mean, that would be the question, right, Joseph? Tex, I'll throw it to you. I'll throw it to you, Vincent.
Well, that's definitely one way to look at it for sure. Maybe he wasn't in his right mind, but as an investigator, as a former investigator myself, I would question why you passed two other hospitals that you could have been to in several minutes versus going to Emory on the other side of town that doesn't specialize in this type of treatment. And I would really question why you didn't call 911 to say, hey, my wife's been shot. We are en route. Those are questions I'm sure the jury's asking as well.
I think you're right. Hey, Vincent, thank you so much for being with us here today on Law and Crime. I hope that we will see you soon. And are you heading back into the courtroom later today?
I am.
Okay, so we'll see you. Please be keeping our eyes and ears in there, all right? And we'll see you later on Law and Crime.
Most definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And let's now go back into previously recorded testimony today from one of the nurses that really is shedding so much light on when Diane arrived there and the kind of the treatment she was given, but also what the nurses were talking about, what their impressions of Tex were, how he was reacting, and really what their impressions were of him and on that fateful day. Let's go back to that recorded testimony that we heard earlier today.